Hey everyone, welcome to the first edition of The Breakdown. Here we will try to analyse events surrounding MotoGP in a manner that is objective as possible to offer more insight into how it could affect the sport. Without further delay, here is The Breakdown. The Dutch TT this year was an action-packed race that saw title contenders Fabio Quartararo and Aleix Espargarò coming together on the third lap. Fabio immediately admitted that it was his mistake. Given the recent trend with such incidents, it was expected by many to be deemed a racing incident. However, Fabio was later given a long lap penalty for the next race, and this has led to some questions. I'm your host Dylan Shelley, and first up on Moto World, breakdown of Fabio Quartararo's long lap penalty. Fabio's optimistic move led to him crashing out and Aleix ending up in 15th on the third lap. While Aleix would recover to 4th, Fabio registered his first DNF of the season. There was, however, no animosity between the two, as Fabio apologised immediately after the race and Aleix took it in a rather cheerful manner. This led many to believe that the matter was closed. However, a little later the stewards announced that Fabio will have to serve a long lap penalty at the next race for causing the crash. The explanation they gave was, the FIM MotoGP stewards panel deemed Quartararo was overly ambitious in attempting to overtake Espargarò. Number 20 was not in a position to successfully complete the move and subsequently crash, causing contact with number 41 and forcing him to run wide. The avoiding action undertaken by Espargarò allowed him to avoid crashing and rejoin. Nevertheless, his race was severely impacted. To someone who was watching a race for the first time, this would seem like a very fair penalty, and as per the regulations, it is. Part 2 of Article 1.21 of the FIM regulations states, riders must ride in a responsible manner which does not cause danger to other competitors or participants, either on the track or in the pit lane. Any infringement of this rule may be penalised by the FIM MotoGP stewards. This is arguably quite open to interpretation, and hence the rulings can and have been inconsistent from one race to another, and that is where the problem lies. In Mugello, LCR Honda's Takaki Nakagami made a strong move on Alex Rins and there was no penalty. At the next race in Catalunya, Taka went one step further by trying to outbrake around 10 riders into turn 1 of the first lap and wiped out Alex Rins and Pecco Bagnaia in the process. This was almost as overly ambitious and irresponsible as it could get, as Alex Rins would suffer a fracture that would prevent him from taking part in the next race, while Pecco suffered a major blow to his championship aspirations. The two key reasons given for Fabio's penalty are that he was not in a position to successfully complete the move, and that because of his actions, Aleix's race was severely impacted. By both those metrics, Taka's crash was a much more serious infraction. Fabio's crash only pushed Aleix into the gravel trap. Neither Aleix nor his bike suffered any damage, and he was able to rejoin and still be the fastest rider on track. His pace suggested that he could have won, but despite the clash, he managed to finish the race in 4th. Pecco and Alex, on the other hand, were completely wiped out in Catalunya. The impact of the crash was more severe, and it was still deemed a racing incident. A precedent had been set, which was flouted just 2 races later. So, had Taka been penalised, there would be little to no arguing that Fabio deserved the penalty as well, but since that was not the case, Fabio's penalty has come across as a bit harsh for many. One could argue that the severity of the penalty could be determined based on how damaging the outcome is for the other rider, but this could open up an entirely new can of worms. Riders might deliberately exaggerate the effect of a coming together to make it seem as if the rider causing the incident deserves a harsher penalty. A rider who is out of the title fight, for example, could help their teammate who is still in the title fight by taking a dive akin to what happens in football. Human intervention in the form of the stewards will always be needed to determine if a rider is at fault and to what degree. Moving forward, it would be ideal if the FIM stewards could be a bit more consistent with their rulings. If one rider incurs a penalty for an overly optimistic move, then the same degree of severity should be applied for anyone else doing the same, irrespective of whether the riders are fighting at the front or at the back of the grid. To put simply, there will always be a few grey areas when it comes to determining whether a move was overly ambitious or not. However, with greater consistency, the feeling of injustice will be reduced, or perhaps even eliminated. If this long lap penalty eventually ends up costing Fabio the championship, then it will not only cast a shadow on the championship fight, as something other than the actual racing would determine its outcome, but it will also take away a little something from what would otherwise be a memorable maiden championship for Aleix. Fabio, as he has admitted, made an error, but others have gotten away with arguably more serious infractions. and maybe the FIM should deliberate and reflect a bit more before making their decisions. Have the FIM stewards been fair and consistent with their decisions this year? Head over to my community page to vote in the poll and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you liked this video, feel free to subscribe and check out my others for all the latest in the world of MotoGP.